My name is Lauren Cruz, and this is my signature project too, The Effects of RTI and Evidence-Based Practices on Mathematical Literacy. My supporting data. My top figure is the Lee County Schools average math test scores compared to the state average test scores. My bottom figure is the NAEP Mathematics Achievement Test results. The schools that I pulled my data from show a decrease in mathematic literacy proficiency levels over the years since 2013. While the county has an average slightly above the state average, it is still below 60%, leaving more than 40% of students with math literacy levels below proficient. With many schools so close to a borderline half and half of proficient and not proficient, RTI and evidence-based practices would be able to improve students' levels. RTI and evidence-based practices are recent interventions implemented by schools with less than 2 decades of schools using them as a standard. Many schools do not use them, and most teachers prefer to stay with their old ways. The purpose of this study. The purpose of this study is to examine the impact of RTI methods and evidence-based practices when applied correctly on student mathematic literacy. My hypothesis is that when successfully used, RTI and EBPs will cause an increase in student mathematic literacy. Supporting research. For my supporting research, I chose the information processing theory and the CRA method. The information processing theory has 3 main characteristics and is based on the thought that people process knowledge that they receive instead of just responding or reacting to things that they see. It is by Robert Siegler, and according to him, encoding involves the process of collecting and the representation of that information. Storage is the process of holding information in memory, and retrieval is obtaining the information when needed. The CRA method is the concrete representational abstract theory. These work well together for creating a mathematical framework and are especially helpful in universal design. RTI is a component of universal design. RTI initially focused on reading interventions but has expanded to include mathematics now. Research-based instruction materials combined with a multi-tiered teacher support system show that students outperform control school students on many measures of achievement. RTIs and EBPs have been used in the special education field since IDEA was updated in 2004. It provides many struggling students with academic support and success. My action plan. This study will be conducted as a quantitative study in order to explore the impact of RTI and evidence-based practices on mathematic literacy levels in students. I intend to provide students with lessons in the format of RTI methods with evidence-based practices provided. Data will be gathered from student work samples, assessments, and tests. A pre-test and post-test assessment would be provided to students before and after RTI and evidence-based practices have been implemented. Sampling would be random, predetermined amounts from each grade for a control group and an experimental group. Students would be chosen from grades K, kindergarten, through 12. The pre- and post-test assessment of the study would be using STAR Math. Students would receive post-lesson assessments in order to help keep track of proficiency changes throughout the study. The expected action plan is to last from at minimum 18 weeks and at maximum 36 weeks. 18 weeks would be 2 9-weeks or a semester for a school, and 36 weeks would be a whole school year. So I would begin at the beginning of a school year and finish either at the end of the second 9 weeks or at the end of the school year. Random sampling would be used to gather the predetermined amount of students from each grade that's participating. I think that for this action plan, you would need to collaborate with the administration of a school, other special education teachers, any specialists involved, general education teachers, and parents. STAR Math can eliminate human error from administrators, but students may also experience test anxiety, which is why it would be recommended to give STAR Math at a predetermined time, such as every month, so that students would be able to get used to it. The test can be given multiple times in order to receive data on their students' skills or improvements. It provides scores, comparisons to previous scores, percentile ranks, and grade levels, and expected grade levels for a student. The limitations for this study I would expect would be school-wide testing that might interrupt with lessons being implemented, and state curriculums could interrupt or change what lessons or standards are picked. Absences could affect the study groups, such as illnesses, athletics, school field trips, or substitute teachers if the teacher is absent. Adequate representation of a general population might be difficult if proper schools are not picked. For example, if you picked a school in a city, you might have more students with economic struggles. Parental involvement in student academics could also prove to be a limitation. You could have parents that are completely hands-off and do not help their students at home. Connection to student achievement. A low student math literacy in K-12 schools can result in many things: decreased academic motivation, generalization issues, critical thinking skills, decreased self-esteem, and higher dropout rates. I would anticipate that the results would have shown an increase in math literacy scores due to past studies performed. By having an increase in their literacy scores, students would probably be more motivated to attend school and to do well and to learn. I think that they would have an easier time with generalization and applying general math concepts across the board. Their critical thinking skills would improve. Their self-esteem would improve because they're able to perform math questions by themselves. And I think the dropout rates would lower because students don't feel inadequate or unsuccessful. For my analysis, instead of using all the grades, I would just pick specific grades to test, such as 1st, 4th, 8th, and 12th, like that was demonstrated in one of the first graphs in the beginning. I think that doing all the grades kindergarten through 12th would make it a little difficult and possibly more expensive. Not only that, but that would require the collaboration of multiple schools, and if it happened during the month of testing in a school of Alabama, that would provide an additional hardship. I also question random sampling because I wonder, does this leave a harmful impact on students who might be in special education? Will randomly assigning students to a control group and experimental group leave any students who required accommodations or modifications at a disadvantage if it's not accounted for? These are things that I did not think about when I was creating an action plan. For my next steps, if I had completed this study, I would promote teachers in schools implementing the use of RTI and evidence-based practice methods. I would train more teachers in the use of RTI and EBPs and how to implement universal design. Currently, it is mostly special education teachers that have the most training and knowledge on RTI and evidence-based practices. A lot of general education teachers, if they are in the older generations, like to stick with their ways, and newer general education teachers might be experienced in universal design, but they don't necessarily know as much about EBPs. I would look for similar studies to see their results. And these are my references.